My son was really happy, smiley, outgoing. Then there were changes. His memory was affected. His behaviour became irrational. His handwriting started to trail down the page, and school noticed that he was very withdrawn.
We'd got a perfectly happy, sunny little 7-year-old, and she woke up the next day and she started to scream and scream and scream and didn't stop. And then very quickly, in the wake of that, we had all the other symptoms come on: the anxiety, the inability to be able to write, the needing to go to the toilet constantly, the OCD, the rage. It all came over the course of 24 hours.
I found her crying in her bedroom with all her clothes on the floor after one morning asking her to get dressed, and she said to me, "I know I need to put the clothes on, but I can't remember what order."
My bright, articulate 6-year-old boy one day became incredibly emotional and started speaking words that were not English, and it frightened me.
My youngest son is now 10 years old. We noticed a dramatic change following an ear infection at 2 years old. We didn't realise at the time, but this was the start of his PANS symptoms. My eldest son is now 12. His symptoms began when he was 8 years old.
My daughter is 4 years old. She was 3 at onset.
My son is now 7 years old and he was diagnosed with PANDAS last summer at age 6. But we think onset was 2 years before that at age 4.
We have 2 children affected by PANS and PANDAS. For us, the journey started 7 years ago when our eldest daughter was just 4 years old. She's now 12 and has been suffering that whole time.
Our daughter is 14 and she's had it for 7.5 years.
My eldest son is 10. He first became ill when he was 7. He's been ill for 3 years and he's got a long way to go before he is well again. My youngest son is 7. He's been ill for a year and he's just been diagnosed with PANDAS.
My daughter is 14 years old. She became ill when she was about 6 or 7, so she's been suffering for over 7 years now.
My son's onset was at the age of 12. He's now 21 and he's lost 9 years of his life.
To hear your 7-year-old talk about how they want to die because then they would be in heaven and heaven's good, and to actually plan out how they plan to take their own life is not something any parent should hear.
The worst symptoms were probably the sadness, depression, and not wanting to join in with things.
The worst symptoms for us to cope with has been the rage. We've had police out trying to get my daughter off the roof, threatening to taser my daughter as she has a knife, threatening to hurt herself. She's ran away in the middle of the night just to try and get away from her thoughts.
PANS is a condition that doesn't just affect the sufferer. It is completely consuming for the whole family. Parents become isolated. They become ill themselves because they have to fight a system that isn't listening. Imagine the biggest and darkest monster ever, with claws like knives, the foulest breath, and who breathes fire. Imagine that monster. Now put it inside a child. This is what our children have to suffer. This is PANS.
This illness has been devastating for our family. As a result, my partner has given up her job at least 3 times. My other children have been affected, both in terms of their well-being, the amount of time they've had with their parents, and of course, they're worried about their sister too.
Financially, it's also had a huge impact on us as a family. Not only did we have to pay out of pocket for various private treatments and to take our eldest child abroad for treatment, but I've also had to give up on a good career to stay at home and care for them.
Our doctor, we're fortunate, is on the NHS, but being on the NHS, they're sceptical and resources tight, so we haven't had all the testing that we would like to have had done.
In the private sector, we have found a doctor who will help us, and that has been expensive, but an absolute game changer.
We went into so many appointments with optimism and hope, thinking that this could be the one that's going to help our child, but then coming out completely deflated, feeling depressed and just not listened to most of the time.
Our life is completely different to how it was a few years ago. It's completely turned it on its head. We don't thrive, we survive, and quite often our family is in crisis.
PANS PANDAS had a huge impact on our family. How we're all still standing and hanging on together, I really don't know.
The hardest thing about having a child with PANS is the lack of understanding. Friends don't understand, family don't understand, schools don't understand, society doesn't understand, professionals don't understand.
One of the hardest things about having a PANS child is the uncertainty that suddenly comes into your life, never knowing from one day or even 1 minute to the next what life is going to throw at you.
The hardest thing about having a child with PANS is watching your child disappear before your very eyes. One day you have your sunny, happy child, and suddenly that child's gone and replaced with a child that you don't recognise anymore.
It's all consuming. And in my case, I feel it's almost become my identity. It's what I think about 90% of the time, and it's very lonely.
It changed our life because it made us feel like we weren't crazy. It made us feel like we weren't bad parents, because you do doubt yourself. And on this journey, you have a lot of professionals gaslight you because they don't have the resource to help your children. They don't know how to help your children.
When we found a neurologist that supported us and he confirmed our suspicions were right, we did feel really reassured, and we just felt hopeful that we'd get our son back and we could just make this nightmare just go away.
It was just nice to find a doctor or two doctors. We found two doctors that believed us more than supported us. And still then, there wasn't really much that they could do, but the fact that they just believed us went a long way.
When you finally find a doctor who is experienced in treating children with PANS and PANDAS, it's a real mix of emotions as a parent. For me though, probably the biggest one was relief. Relief that we'd finally been listened to and that our child was finally going to get help that they so desperately needed.
And I wish I'd have known that there would be no support from doctors.
I wish I'd known about the very existence of PANDAS and PANS, because maybe I would have caught it earlier.
Before the onset of PANDAS in my eldest child, I wish I'd had the knowledge of how a physical infection can cause psychiatric symptoms in children.
I wish I knew about PANS when my son first got ill, because he may not be the severity that he is now. If we'd known that antibiotics would have potentially cured him 3 years ago, then we as a family could be in a very different place right now.
If I was to give any advice to a parent starting out on this journey, I would say document everything, and I mean everything. Video and photo evidence are the best if you can get it, because this is a condition that really needs to be seen to be believed.
My advice would be to find other parents that have been through this or still going through this that can support you and point you in the right direction, because other than that and finding the charity, there's nothing else out there to help you.
Please, please, please remember to look after themselves, because as a parent, you're not going to be at the top of your game if you are hungry and tired and emotionally drawn out.
PANS PANDAS is new to us, but my advice to any other parent knowing that something just isn't right with your child is please listen to your gut.